Well, a hearty shalom to you. Jeffrey Seif here. Glad to walk with you to and through the scriptures. Tavo is on the menu. It starts in Deuteronomy chapter 26 and goes out a few chapters. I'm just really interested in the beginning. Tavo comes from two words, ki tavo, when you enter. The book Deuteronomy, of course, as noted, Deuteronomy means Deuteronomos, second law. It's a recap of what God wants. The first generation has died off by the time of Moses' recitation, by the time of his reiteration here. And this is a new generation that has a mandate to go take the land. And it's not if you enter. Of course, sometimes when you have challenges ahead of you, you go, they're so big. But, to use a New Testament saying, if you have faith, you can move a mountain. These were individuals wandering in a wilderness, and now they have to go into Canaan, and there are very big people there, tall people there, in fortifications on hills, and they're not used to all that. They've had some open field skirmishes, but now there's a trial ahead of them. And I like it. It's just tacit. It's inferred. When you enter, they're going to enter. They're going to take possession of it. He says, when you enter the land that the Lord is giving you as an inheritance, and you possess it and dwell in it, faith begins with the assumption that you're going to have success in your adventures. And sometimes that can be so very hard to have that confidence. Confidence comes from the Latin confides, and it means with faith. It's easy to talk about. Sometimes it's hard to have. But it's good to live proleptically, that is to say, to act like you're going to have success even before you have it. And that's what's at play here. He says, when you go into the land that the Lord has given you, and you possess it, it's yours. Of course, they will contest it before they possess it. But that's not what this is about. We're not talking about the war. We're talking about afterwards. And they finished the battle. They're not fighting the locals. They're fighting the terrain. They turn their swords into plowshares, and they dig furrows and they farm. He says, you were to take some of the first of all the produce of the soil, which you gather from your land that the Lord your God has given you, put it in a basket and go to the place the Lord your God chooses to make his name dwell. Prophetically, inasmuch as he's speaking about their having success in the land, he's similarly talking with some forward thinking here about Jerusalem and the temple established there, and they are beckoned to take produce and give it unto the Lord. You're looking at tithing here, what we call tithing today, to give an apportionment to the Lord. I want to skip down, if you will, in the giving. It's interesting. There's something that's recited, and this is really what I want to talk about. You were to respond before the Lord your God and say, and I quote, my father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Egypt and lived there as an outsider, few in number. Once upon a time, he says, when you come into the land and you have good success, and you've won your battles against armies, and you won your battles against the earth and produced a crop, you bring it to the Lord and say, look, I remember once upon a time I come from stock. He was a wandering nomad, and we went down to Egypt, few in number. But there he became a great nation, mighty and numerous. God did a work in Egypt and brought us out. The Egyptians treated us badly in verse 6, afflicted us, imposed labor, but God delivered us from all that. In verse 7, we cried to the Lord, and he heard our voice. He saw our affliction. Of course, he delivered us. In verse 8, he brought us forth with a mighty hand. In verse 9, he brought us to this place and gave us this land flowing with milk and honey. All that is a prelude. Remember, they're there with their offerings. In verse 10, so now look, I have brought the first fruit of the soil that you have given me, Lord. Would that we can say that. Once upon a time we were hard-pressed between a rock and a hard place, bested by sin and circumstance, but the Lord gave us a second chance, dusted us off a new life that comes pregnant with possibilities, and gave us revenues and jobs. And it's a way of saying thank you. Tithing is a way of saying thank you based on an understanding that the money that we give is translated into a good purpose beyond us for the kingdom's sake. That can be the maintenance of a physical plant where a congregation meets for good works to pay salaries associated with the staff that facilitate the good work, the electric bill, the gasoline that moves the youth fan around the place. There's different ways the money is put to work. Beyond money going to a congregation, it goes through a congregation to various good works. Here they're beckoned to take revenue to a centralized place. And with a sense of gratitude, say, God, look, once upon a time I was in a bad way, but in your grace you delivered me here. Use this for a good purpose to deliver somebody else. That is part of what it means to be religious. You can't say you love your God and turn your eye to your brother. It just doesn't work that way. And really, you can't say you love anyone or anything if you're not putting your money where your mouth is. A guy's going to have no success in life. Yeah, I really love you, babe. But it just so happens he cashes his paychecks and spends it on other girlfriends. Spends it on toys, his fishing boat and all the rest. And by the time he gets home, there's half a paycheck there. Here, honey, pay for the diapers, and pay for the food, pay for the formula. It doesn't work that way. I mean, if you love her, you're going to bring it home. You're going to put it right there. And that relationship's not going to abide long if you're burning both ends of the candle. What we do with our money says a lot about what we're all about at the end of the day. And here, individuals are beckoned to say, look, here, now, Lord, here it is. I'm giving this over to you. Look, I have brought the fruits. Then you are to set it down before the Lord and worship before the Lord your God. To worship something, the word worship comes from the word ship and worth. Worth-ship. See, worth-ship, worship. Look, I put that together for you. It means we find worth in something or in someone. I tell my wife casually, I worship you. I find great value in her. God, of course, worship him, find great value in him. But if you find value, if you find worth in something, you're going to reciprocate. You're going to invest your person into it. And here, you're investing your time. What do I mean by that? These are farmers. It takes a certain amount of time to prepare the land. It takes a certain amount of time to sow the seed into the land. It takes a certain amount of time to reap the harvest from the land. It takes a certain amount of time to process it. And it takes a certain amount of time to take the residual process from the land and give it to the Lord. This is your time. If you value something, you take your time and you translate it into something of value. I value my wife. I went and bought her a diamond ring with a few diamonds in it. It cost a few $1,000s. I won't tell you how many, but I make a certain amount per hour. And here, as an extension of worth, here, honey, for you. That's what this tithing is. It's here, Lord, for you. And we're beckoned to do that. They're beckoned to do that here. Look, I brought the first fruits. Set it down before the Lord your God and worship. You will rejoice in all the good the Lord your God has given to you and to your house, you, the Levite, and the outsider in your midst. We want to be faithful unto the Lord. We want to be able to process and give to the Lord. Don't make your pastor look at the week's offering and say, well, there's always next week. Give him a reason to be happy. Let the Levite be glad you're there. I don't know who gives money. I do get a bottom line and amount of what came in. Ministers generally do that. I don't track where the money's coming from because I don't want it to affect the way I think about anybody. But let's be gracious unto the Lord. It's a way of saying thank you. We're not under the law. The principles of the Torah, however, endure from generation to generation. And here what happens is you can rejoice before the Lord because you're thankful. The Levite can rejoice, and the outsider can rejoice as well. The needs of the needy are attended to because you are careful and prayerful and giving. Well, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and let's do this again. How about it? Same time next week. God bless.